It's a quick flight from Key West to Havana, but it's going to be some time before it will be an easy one.
The trip has been pretty complicated. First was securing permission from our government.
You still can't fly to Cuba as a tourist. You can go only under one of 12 exemptions to the U.S. imposed travel ban. But AOPA is engaging with the Cubans to make it as easy as possible for your flight when things do open up.
In the early part of 2015, we had a very good meeting with representatives from the IACC, which is the Cuban equivalent of the FAA, to talk about the infrastructure necessary to accommodate general aviation traffic should things open up.
10 Golf Alpha, 8 mile from touchdown, contact tower 118.1. Have a good day.
118.1, have a good day, 10 Golf Alpha. Good afternoon, Jose Marti Tower, Caravan 810 Golf Alpha, inbound ILS 6.
November 810 Golf Alpha, good afternoon, wind 360 degrees. 14 knot, chicken ice 1011, clear to land runway 06.
Clear to land runway 6, A10 Golf Alpha, thank you.
So after touching down at Jose Marti International Airport,
Welcome to Havana, this is exciting.
And a warm welcome from Cuban authorities, the AOPA team met with the Cuban equivalent of the FAA.
You were very good in your explanation in Montreal that you understand how important this general aviation is, and you wanted it to be a pleasant experience. We want to help you make that a pleasant experience.
Tom Haynes showed examples of the AOPA Caribbean and Bahamas flight guides to show how AOPA could help educate U.S. pilots on flying in Cuba.
So it's another vehicle we have for communicating with pilots about how to safely fly to different locations.
Now, the Cubans conceded they do not have much experience with general aviation.
We are concerned about the increase of the general aviation in Cuba, so we want to get ready. We want to prepare. We thank you for your offer to help. We took note of which way you are able to help us.
And there will be plenty for pilots to see and do once they can travel to Cuba.
Well, Havana is a city full of history, but it depends on whether you're a history buff or a jazz buff, for example, like I am, and we went to the most amazing jazz club I think I've ever been to. The Cubans are great musicians.
The Cessna Twin Flyer group was there under the people-to-people exchange exception. Now, there are no GA airports yet in Cuba. The international airports are limited in the number of GA aircraft they can handle. Arrival and departure is time-consuming, including fee payment, traveling around the airport to get required signatures, filing flight plans, and there is no VFR per se in Cuba. But there are high hopes for general aviation.
We won't have any kind of difficulties in developing normal operations of sport aviation, or more properly, general aviation.
The Aviation Club of Cuba hopes to develop the Cuama Airport into an international general aviation airport to serve the resort area of Varadero. Someday, flying to Cuba will be great, just as it once was years ago.
Be patient. It is going to take some time for things to work out, to get to the level of international travel like we're accustomed to with Bahamas, Canada, or Mexico, but I think it's going to be well worth the wait.
And Craig is right, Melissa. Once things are in place and once they open things up, it'll be a lot easier for us to make the trip of a lifetime.
So if somebody wants to fly to Cuba today, what do they need to do?
Well, first thing they need to do is make sure that they can do it legally. I mean, right now, tourists are still prohibited from going to Cuba. That's a U.S. government prohibition, not a Cuban provision. There are about 12 exceptions that you need to have, that you can qualify under, like people-to-people or professional meetings, which is what we went under. And then you have to have an agenda, and you have to keep records of everything, and you have to show it to U.S. Customs when you return, and you have to keep those records for like about 5 years.
So very bureaucratic, but I understand while you were in Cuba that you did an internal flight. Is there infrastructure? Can you get avgas?
Flying in Cuba is actually, once you get past all of the trámites, which is the Spanish word for formalities. It sounds like trauma, doesn't it? actual flying is very easy. The controllers speak excellent English. The handoff from Miami Center to Havana Center is seamless. Terminology is the same. Everything else is the same. It's very easy. Avgas is available, but they can't always guarantee that it's going to be at the airport. They say you have to call ahead and make sure that they're going to have it.
Great. And so any general impressions that you want to share?
General impression is that, Cuba is number one, they're very warm to Americans. They very much want us to come visit. The country itself is very run down. It's like things haven't been maintained for, 30, 40 years, which you can understand when you know that a gallon of paint will cost the average Cuban about a month's salary. But while the people are poor, they aren't destitute. So there is sort of a basic level of living that everyone rises to there.
Right. Wow. What an interesting trip. I'm sure you're glad you were a part of it.
Yeah. And one more bit. If pilots want to go to Cuba right now, Craig Spence also has another bit of advice for them.
Get a third-party provider that's been there, that knows the people, and that can coordinate on your behalf on what you're going to do on the ground. That is essential. You can't do this like you would plan a trip in the United States going online. This has to be done through a qualified third-party provider.
The folks who run the International Air Rally handled many of the arrangements for us. Now, they also did the Twin Cessna Flyer Tour, and I tell you, Melissa, the ground logistics alone are daunting.
Thanks, Warren.